Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I've got a video for you about the input delay at competitive Call of Duty events. You may have heard at the CWL Pro League playoffs this weekend, there were a lot of pros complaining about input delay and input lag and controller problems and display problems, LAN lag, and all sorts of stuff, especially on one particular gaming station where all the players would sit down, the whole team of 4. All of the PlayStation 4s and all the controllers and monitors and LAN lag were kind of stacked against them with huge delays, and supposedly no team that played on that particular station won all weekend. I wasn't there, so I can't verify about it, but my lord, were there ever a lot of complaints on Twitter. I have some opinions about this. I've experienced some of this. I have some perspectives on the hardware and technology, and a few solutions I wanted to talk about, along with showing off a little bit of Black Ops 3 gameplay. Gonna have some clips from a couple of different games of TDM. I only did clips and not full games because I couldn't go on a big tear, basically because TDM players do not know how to have fun. There's way too many campers and dark corner McDougal, and I guess that makes sense because the only goal is to kill people, and rushing like crazy isn't always rewarded. But anyway, when I first heard about this, I was really interested in testing this out. I thought that I could get the hardware involved, test it here in my home environment, and determine the actual input delay, but unfortunately it turned out to be very impractical for me because the hardware was very expensive. It is difficult to measure, and mostly because there's multiple pieces of hardware involved, and even then I couldn't exactly simulate a LAN event. However, I do have some experience playing at these events with good old Team Pinkwall, both main stage and regular, and on their setups and at different capture events, and there are just some things I wanted to talk about. So I have personally experienced input delay at CWL events on PlayStation 4. Mind you, my experience is quite dated now. I think the last time I did it was last Anaheim, so that would be almost 9-10 months ago, if I'm not mistaken, which is not exactly an up-to-date sort of opinion. But I am up to date on the technology. And fun historical fact, before we have a whole bunch of salty Xbox One fanboys saying that we should just swap COD back to Xbox, because Xbox didn't have these problems. Xbox 360 really didn't, but do keep in mind that Xbox One at the time of the swap didn't even have a LAN feature. It had to have a simulated LAN, which meant you played on a special build of the game that connected to like a simulated Xbox Live that would connect to a server in the room instead of just setting up LAN, and it would still go through the internet, and it was crazy, and people were like sending pros messages and DMs and game invites while they were playing on main stage. It was a big mess. PlayStation doesn't have that sort of mess, but it does have a problem mostly with the controller. So there's some factors to keep in mind about the PlayStation and really any gaming console, and that's that consoles are not in any way designed for competitive play or for LAN events. Now, they might have some features and some, connectability or whatever, but at the end of the day, they're designed for the home environment. They're designed for 1 or 2 consoles per house, sitting by your TV, sitting beside it next to your computer, and they're not really flexible for modifications like a PC. You can't take them apart and do a whole lot with them. You can't customize them a whole lot. They're relatively simple devices that are designed to sit in a single house by a TV with relatively good cooling and be played for much shorter periods of time than a PC. Heat is a big factor with this. Now, the consoles are designed to be resilient with heat, especially after the notorious Xbox 360 failures, but no matter how resiliently you design them, if you're running in a small area with 50 plus consoles that are side by side with surge protectors and monitors and headsets plugged up, and people, you forget how warm people are, how much sweat and body-like heat they add to this environment and consoles, and they all sit there for 12 hours in this area, they're going to get hot. They're going to get really hot, and when electronics get hot, they start doing strange, unpredictable things. Another factor to keep in mind is that there is some degree of display lag on your monitor. Now, this is usually fixed for competitive events because we're running higher end BenQs, though I have seen some people do strange things to their BenQ monitors and put them in weird settings and definitely increase the input lag a little bit, but that's a display lag. You can go to display lag, I think it's displaylagdatabase.com, and look up your monitor or your TV and see how much it has. But if everybody has the same one, which is common, it's not really a problem. But again, I have seen people do really goofy things with the settings. The biggest problem is probably going to be with the PlayStation 4 controller. Now, the PlayStation 4 controller itself uses Bluetooth only, the original controller, because this is designed for a home environment. It's not designed for LAN. It just connects via Bluetooth, sends data fast, good refresh rate, not usually any interference, and that's not really a problem for 99% of the people that use it. However, if you're at an event with maybe 50 or 100 people using Bluetooth on their controllers in a small area with lots of technology, with lots of static and electrical interference, and people having Bluetooths on their phones and their laptops and their computers, using the Wi-Fi constantly, sending data up and down, you're going to get a lot of strange things happen. As a matter of fact, I experienced this in person at PAX, and that's the video I linked down below in the description, because you can see me on stream struggling with up to a second of input delay because the lag is so bad, because there's so much interference, and a lot of it had to do with J-Hub having Bluetooth on in his phone. It was interfering with me a lot. So the solution here, after the first couple of problematic tournaments, was to use the Cronus Max adapter. This little device is essentially a USB device that lets you play keyboard and mouse on console. However, if you plug a PlayStation 4 controller on it, it forces the PlayStation 4 controller to use USB only. Somehow, I'm not an expert on this, and it does add a super tiny delay. Now, Cronus Max and most of the people at CWL and everybody will tell you that there is no delay. It's probably no noticeable delay, a barely measurable delay, a minuscule delay, but anytime you add another step in cableage, especially something that alters or changes the signal in some way, there is a tiny delay. It might even just be like a 1 millisecond or less delay, but there is some delay. However, what I found to be unusual is that I've been told it varies depending on what patch the Cronus Max adapter is on. Some of the versions of the hardware and some of the patches that the different versions can be on have differing amounts of input delay, most of them tiny, some of them more noticeable, and this is one that I too have experienced in person last year at Anaheim. There were very noticeable input delays, and it made it very difficult to aim and track targets and, you know, be useful. It made the entire game much slower than it would have been for me normally. Now, Sony heard this problem loud and clear, some of it having to do with that event that I was at last time, and there are now new PS4 Pro controllers. Some of them, I think Razer makes one, I'm not sure about the other company that makes them, and I know Scuf makes them as well, where you can use USB only, to where when you hook it up via USB, it's supposed to use USB only and be completely delay-free and interference-free. However, pros complain about them still not working. Now, I use them at home, and it's just fine. I have no issues here at home, but the home environment is not the LAN environment, as we have discussed. But they're saying they're not working. I honestly believe them. While they are kind of a whiny bunch, they do have very, very good reaction times, and they know when something is wrong, especially when it comes to delay and lag. Now, these Pro controllers, man, I hope I'm not overstepping or mistaking here. The Pro controllers, I think, are also supposed to be used with a Cronus Max as well. I think it's sort of a standard thing that everybody is supposed to connect through to go to the PlayStation 4, and people get mixed results there as well. Some people like using the old controllers with the Cronus Max, some people like the new controllers with the Cronus Max, some people want to go Bluetooth. I believe that's still an option, and you get sort of different mileage with every single setup, and I do believe that's a big problem at events. And it's interesting because you want people to be able to bring their own equipment, you want them to have their own good stuff, you want some degree of customization, and you don't want to force them to use one set thing, especially when there's a lot of gaming accessories and accessory companies that like to advertise here and be a part of this. But when it comes to input delay, there's clearly a problem with all of the PlayStation 4 controllers and the consoles and the Cronus Maxes, and something is going wrong somewhere. Finally, don't forget that the Call of Duty engine has built-in delay even on split screen. As we've discussed before on the channel, the engine has a couple of milliseconds of lag. Even if you're running split screen, it's just an oddity of how it's programmed, and on LAN that's going to be more noticeable. So in short, yes, I believe that pros are suffering at these events. I 100% believe that there are input delay and display lag problems and things like that. However, I also believe it's going to vary wildly from person to person, and it's a big problem for MLG, for the CWL, for Activision, and for the pros and everybody involved. And as big of a problem as it is, it's also a huge opportunity to finally solve this problem and help standardize competitive console play. Call of Duty is the biggest player on the competitive console market, and now don't get me wrong, Halo it's big, but it's not what it used to be. Now Street Fighter and Smash are totally different animals, but when it comes to competitive console, most people think about Call of Duty. Why not put in the time and resources to really solve this problem? Why don't we get some proper engineers on it to break out the test boards and the switches and the capture cards and actually test out the input delay on the various configurations of the devices, when they're hot, when they're cold, when you're running a Cronus Max on this, that, and that patch and other, and you actually get some real data on it. Getting good data on this problem is step 1 to fixing it. Step 2 is actually doing the fix, and if you did fix it, it would increase console gaming's credibility as an esport significantly. You wouldn't have this sort of bad PR on Twitter, and there would be a whole nother level of accessibility for people at events. Now, my personal guess at a solution, as somebody who is not there and has not done the test and doesn't know exactly, I would bet that having new PS4 Pros would help. I would also bet that spacing them out a lot more would help a lot for cooling, maybe even with some direct fanning or some lower temperature AC. Now, you can't make the AC too low, because when that happens, people's hands get kind of clammed up and they can't aim as good and they get kind of runny and they nasally on the mics. You don't want that, but some sort of cooling would be nice. You need to do those input delay tests on the Cronus Max and with the controllers, and you need to find the one with the very least amount of input delay. Out of all the tests, you just take whatever the solution is with the least amount of input delay and you make that the standard. Once that's the standard, you ban all non-optimal controllers. You just, like all these people complaining about their Bluetooth problems and their old controller problems and the console, just nope, all of that. You can either get the new equipment, whatever it is, Razer, Scuff, or whatever, and use that with the no delay, or you can use the standard PlayStation 4 controller, however it turns out to be optimal, so we don't have any Johns, no complainers, no whiners, no big frustrations here. And then finally, you can take all this information to Sony and get them to fix it. If they want to have an esports league, if they want to have a big esports presence, then they need to be ready, able, and willing to solve problems like this. Finally, I think having a standard monitor is important, though that's typical at events, but I think that preventing players from monkeying with the settings is important too, though it's sort of a double-edged sword. You want your players to be able to customize their monitor settings to be similar to what they're like at home, and to have that degree of freedom to control it. However, from team to team, people will change it up and do really weird things with it, so if you had a sort of standard monitor preset, you could prevent people to putting it in goofy modes that can change the input delay. So my solution is essentially test, find the optimal, and standardize everything. You want the inputs and outputs as standard as possible so the playing field is as even as possible, and I think that would help. Guys, that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something useful, and if you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.